Hey friend, they told me you were looking for me. That you were trying to decide the difference between a picture book, a board book, a middle grade, a short story. And I get it, because when I first started off, some of the ideas I had, some picture books I had, they belong more in the middle grade space. Some middle grade ideas I had, I thought they were novels, but they were more short stories. Some poems I had, they were more picture books. I understand your frustration. So this video is actually going to unpack all the genres from board books to YA to help you understand the general guidelines between each of the genres so that you can know where your story lives. Because it might not be that you got a bad idea. It might be that you're just putting it in the wrong package. For those of you who are new here, my name is K.E. Lewis. I am children's author of Never Take Your Rhino on a Plane and Because of Dads. And this channel is here to give you practical tips of how to create good literature for children, whether you be in traditional publishing, self-publishing, in the classroom, in museum spaces, whatever that might look like for you. And by the time you get to the end of this video, you should be able to stop turning your wheels. You should be able to figure out where an idea lives, which space it lives in, if it's too big to go into a picture book, if it's too small to go into a novel. We'll talk about it all in this video. All right, let's get to work. So before we jump into any one genre, we need to know all 6 genres or all 6 categories. Board books, picture books, chapter books, early readers, middle grade, young adult. So let's start at the very beginning. The type of book that's made for our little ones, our babies, those are board books. Ages 0 to 3. These books are made for the youngest of the bunch. In terms of board books, I gotta get my board books. I'm not getting ready to talk and I don't even have my stuff. Hold on. So here are some examples of board books that are in the space. Might be better if I hold it up this way. But here are some examples of board books in the space. If you notice whenever you're opening up board books, for one thing, board books, they are made out of this thick cardboard stock here. And that's the reason why they are called board books. The reason why they are made out of board is because these are for your infants. And babies like to do what? Put things in their mouths. You see the round and smooth corners? These are definitely user-friendly for your babies here. The thing about board books, these are your shortest and your smallest books. These books, if you look at them, the words are super duper sparse in here. And you might have about somewhere between 8 to 20 pages in a board book. But words are super sparse. And these board books tend to focus on colors, shapes, numbers, because these are the books that helps our young readers make sense of the world and the world around them. So alphabets, feelings, anything that is small enough and digestible enough and often teachable for our young readers. So one thing you need to know if you are looking to break into traditional publishing is that people don't break into traditional publishing writing board books. Why? Because board books are so small. And if you look at this sticker price right here, this board book is only $8.99. And so think about the production on this book. By the time the printer is paid, by the time the company is paid, the editor is paid, the writer is paid, the company does not make much money off of these books. So one thing to remember is that at the end of the day, publishing is a business and they're going to try to maximize on their profits, their return on investments. So you definitely won't break into the industry writing board books. You will see that in certain cases though, that some board books are also picture books. In that case, going back to what I said before, you won't break into the space writing board books. Publishers usually get someone who's already in the space because that person will generally understand how board books work. They understand how writing for children works. They don't have to form a new connection or a new relationship with a new writer or new creative to get a board book going. And one last note about board books before we move on is that board books are generally really hard to write because the concept has to be unique enough that people will actually pick it up from the shelf. People will actually buy it and take it home, but you have to condense it for the smallest of readers. Remember, this book is for readers 0 to 3. All right? All right, so our next book is mostly what people think about when they think about children's literature, which is the picture book. And here's a picture book in my hand. The thing that you want to know about picture books is that picture books come in a variety of topics. But this is the book that blends both art and text really well. There is a marriage between the two, just like board books. I forgot to say that about board books. But the text is illustrated. And picture books typically come between 32 and 40 pages. You will notice that these are longer. Picture books are longer. General rule for picture books, 400 to 600 words. Now, I said general. So don't go out here telling people that KE said it's 400 to 600 words, because in some cases there are exceptions. However, I know that we all like to think of ourselves as exceptional, but your first book probably won't exceed that. Probably. Again, there are exceptions to every rule in this industry, but 400 to 600 words typically is the word limit for a picture book. The thing to also consider about picture books is that picture books are meant to be read aloud. So think about these types of books in stages. Let's go back to the board book. So this board book here, this book is solely read aloud to a young reader. Picture books are also read aloud. Ooh, it'll probably help if I did this. Picture books are also read aloud to young readers. The thing about the picture book, though, is that it could be a shared reading experience. So picture books are meant to be read aloud. Board books are meant to be read aloud. Because a couple things happen during that time. And what you need to know about this book is that kids actually learn language through this book. They actually learn their sense of the world through this book. And they actually learn the sense of themselves through this book. When you read aloud to them, they get all three of those things, but they also get an understanding, most importantly, an understanding of language and rhythm and how it works. So reading aloud is essential for picture books. So I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell my mother. If you go into the store and you pick up a picture book and you're not reading it out loud, you are doing yourself a disservice, because picture books are meant to be read out loud. So next time you pick up a picture book, read it out loud, listen for the language, listen for the cadence. Also, another thing about picture books, just because it seems short, that does not make it easy. Picture books are really, really difficult to write because you have 400 to 600 words and only about 32 pages to tell your story. So you need to have an insight and incident. You need to have momentum builders. I call them 3 momentum builders. I don't call them rising action, because rising action is related to conflicts. But all books don't have conflicts, so I call them momentum builders. And we'll talk about momentum builders in another video. But just hang tight on that. But with the picture book, you have insight and incident, 3 momentum builders, your climax, your resolution. And you have to develop your characters. You have to put in rhyme and rhythm, repetition. You have to put in colors and sensory language. Think about imagery. All of these things while keeping in mind that you have to make room for your illustrator. So there's a whole lot of nuts and bolts that you need to consider when you are writing picture books. Another fact about picture books is that picture books come in eighths. So remember I told you generally picture books come in 32 pages. If you have a picture book longer than 32 pages, 32 plus 8 is 40. So you may have a 40-page picture book, or you might have a 48-page picture book, or you might have a 56-page picture book. But they generally don't stretch any longer than that. Usually those people who have longer picture books, it's either a really, really good story. There is either a dream collaborator or collaboration that's happening, or 3, it's an author illustrator, and the publishing company only has to pay one creative, so they think about their return on investment, and because they're only paying one creator, that advance, chances are they will be paying a lower advance for that one creator versus paying 2 people, which will be your writer and illustrator, as opposed to paying an author illustrator who is one person. So bottom line, always consider traditional publishing as a business, because that is exactly what it is. I know a lot of people are here to write these stories out of the kindness of their heart, and I am too. However, at the end of the day, it's a business, and we have to consider bottom line. All right. So we have done board books. We have done picture books, which is for, and I don't think I said this, so picture books are from ages 4 through about 9. Some people say 8, but I like to say about 9. And of course, there are older readers of picture books. So picture books are for everybody, but they're generally written for ages 4 through 9. All right, so in terms of the early reader, I'm going to take it back a little bit, and we're going to go to an early reader I grew up off of. And this is Henry and Mudge. The thing about the early reader is, unlike board books and unlike picture books, this is written for 6 to 7-year-olds. And these are the first books that they will read independently by themselves. So, what does that mean? That means we have to think about the language in here. That means the sentences need to be shorter. We need to use monosyllabic words, or words with one syllable. And we need to make sure a kid is able to master these words without an adult being around. Because remember, they've been read to up until this point, and by the time they pick up an early reader, they should be at a point where they are recognizing words. If not already reading, they should be at a point where they're recognizing words and practicing those newly found reading skills they have. So let's look at this book. Let's just open it up really quickly. So you'll see this, it says, in the summer, Henry and his dog Mudge like to go on picnics. Henry packed the food. He packed jelly sandwiches, pears, and ginger snaps for himself. He packed dry dog food and popcorn for Mudge. They both drank water. All right, now this one, this is actually a level 2. If I had a level 1 picture book, if I had a level 1 early reader, this would actually not have the complex sentences where you have the commas. But if you notice here, we repeat a couple things. We repeat Henry, we repeat Mudge, we repeat he, they. The sentences almost kind of start the same, because you are building kids up to learn to read. If you are trying to flex your writing muscles, this is not the space for you. If you're the person who likes to do the flowery language, if you like to do really flowery language and go on at length with flowery language and just tell a really beautiful story, although you could possibly do it in this space and pull it off, the thing about this space, again, is that you're building up an independent reader and giving him or her confidence. Does it require you to know how phonetics work? Does it require you to know how reading works? You probably want to have a fundamental understanding of how reading works. If you don't have a fundamental understanding of how reading works, my suggestion to you is to tune into a literacy podcast, read some literacy articles, because you can catch up on the conversation really quickly and understand the nuts and bolts. You don't need a literacy degree. Will it help? Absolutely. However, if you are in this space, you need to consider understanding a little bit of child development and literacy and how that works. But if you're one, again, who likes to do elaborate plotting, this is not the space for this big elaborate plot. We need to keep it simple. We have to think about repetition. We have to think about repeated sentence structures, repeated words, so that our kids could have an understanding and they'll actually feel accomplished because they would have read their first book or the first of their books. And this was, of course, hearing much for me brought a sense of accomplishment because I was able to get through these books really, really fast. And it made me feel proud that I was a reader. All right. Cool. Did I miss anything? Oh, as far as length for your early readers, they could be about 32 pages as well. They can extend more than that. Early readers can come in levels, level 1, level 2, level 3. This genre written for 6 to 7 years old, they are typically somewhere between 400 and could be upwards of 1,000 words. And there is some overlap between early reader and chapter books, which we are getting ready to go into right about. Hey, if you made it this far, that means you're serious about your craft and you're trying to understand the world of children's literature and how to break into kid lit. So you really should check out my resources at kelewis.world. Those resources will help you understand the industry, deepen your craft, and give you tools and tricks you'll find useful on your journey. If you are a teacher looking at this video, there are additional resources for you. See how I transform my books into engaging curriculum where you unpack the book and you get to explore literacy, math, science, and the arts. It's the perfect lesson plan for the day that you don't really feel like teaching, but also the ideal prep when preparing for a school visit. So run over to my site at kelewis.world and check out those resources. Now back to the conversation. So let's talk chapter books. So in terms of chapter books, this is an example of a chapter book. Ivy and Bean. Why is it called a chapter book? Well, looky, it has chapters. This is a space where you could actually extend the story. If you look, chapter books come with sparse illustrations, but it's definitely more text heavy here. These are sort of like your gateway novels. So, before a kid is ready to jump into a novel, they will actually take advantage of a chapter book. These are typically for 6 to 10 years old, sometimes a little older. Again, these are all general guidelines. There is some wiggle room, a little wiggle room, but generally speaking, 6 to 10 years old, depending on how comfortable that reader is by the time they get to that age, whether that be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. These chapter books usually stretch from 2,000 to about 15,000 words. They're anywhere from 40 to 100 pages. This one is 120 pages. So this one is 120 pages. The thing about your chapter books is that your chapter books have recurring characters. One thing I find about chapter books that are really successful, they are the chapter books with pairs, unlikely pairs even. So take that into consideration if you are writing chapter books. Just something for thought. Also, remember, going back to what I said, all of this is scaffolding and building a young reader up. Because remember, we started with a board book. From 50, we have gone from a book of 50 words with the board book. And we are now at a book that can stretch up to 15,000 words. And we've gone from reading to the kid to the child actually having their own experience and reading to themselves. In this space, you still need to have some type of awareness of how reading works. You need to think about the words that you are using. You want to make sure that the words are not too difficult. You're building a young reader up because, again, they are still young. One book I like to use to help me out so that I can make sure that I'm not using words that are too large for a group is this book, the Word Book. If you look at any given entry in this book, not only does it give you the synonym for the word, it actually gives you the grade level too. So I would recommend actually getting this. This is helpful across all genres. But if you are nervous about using words that are too big or even words that are too small, this is a great book for you. Yes, please do build challenging text. I'm not telling you to water it down or simplify things for your reader, because we don't want to pander to readers. Young readers are very smart and they know when we're pandering, and they pick up on clues more than we think they do. However, great resource for you. So if you want more awareness, if you one of those people who like to elaborate a bit more and you like to focus on and your protagonist is anywhere between 6 to 10 years old, this is the book. All right, so we've gone from board books to picture books to early readers to chapter books. Now, middle grade. So let's get into novels. Before we get into novels, though, I just wanted to plug it here because I'm not sure I said it along the way. But whenever you are writing for your audience, your protagonist needs to be in the same age group that you're writing for. So if you're writing for a picture book and you know that picture books are for 4 to 9 years old, your main character needs to be 4 to 9 years old. Why? Because you're writing for that particular audience, and children like to be the heroes in their own stories. There are some books that have adult protagonists in them, but those adults are very whimsical and they are very childlike. There is some sort of it factor that those adults have but there is a kid that usually intersects, or kid-like elements that intersects along the way. So just think about that as you are crafting stories. If you're writing a board book, your protagonist needs to be a baby. If you are writing a middle grade, which is a good segue, if you're writing a middle grade, then that person needs to be 9 to 13 years old who you're featuring. You can make them a tad bit older, say 14 if you wanted to make a 14-year-old, put it in the middle grade, because kids like to read about older, like kids in this age, they like to read about older kids. So that is a tip for you, for those of you who are interested in writing middle grade. But middle grades are generally 25 to 50,000 words. If it's fantasy, 60 to 70,000. The thing I want you to get about middle grade, the difference between middle grade and YA, because you are opening up lanes as you go older, you're able to talk about more subjects, more themes. What distinguishes a middle grade novel or middle grade text from a YA text are two things. One, the age of the protagonist, and two, the themes you use in the story. So general themes that middle grades tend to tackle are friendship, identity, values, changes in the family, whether that be divorce or a new sibling or older brother or grandparent moves in the home, that sort of thing. School life, bullying, growing up. Going back to what we said earlier about scaffolding young readers and bringing them up. If you look at this novel right here, you will see that there is not a picture in sight. We have gone from actually having pictures on every page to having pictures on fewer pages to having no pictures at all, and pictures are only on the cover. Not for all middle grade, but this is a middle grade novel. We'll talk about subgenres in the next video. But for this particular example, we've gone from all illustrated images, all illustrated pages, to no illustrated pages at all. Same thing with young adult here. Again, no illustrations here in this. The only illustration, I believe, because this is fantasy, this is Children of Blood and Bone, but I don't know where my jacket is. But only the picture of the world here to ground the reader in what he or she is seeing. But remember the difference between the middle grade and the YA is the age of the protagonist and the theme. Say it again. Age of the protagonist, themes being used. Got it? All right. Now that we've gone through all the genres and you know the basic guidelines of each, these are the questions that you should ask yourself before you pursue a book that will help you to land on where you need to package it. These are the questions that you will need to ask that will help you determine where it fits. So question number 1. How many characters are in this book? What does our cast look like? Because is there one person, 2 people, or are there 4 or 5 characters? Because if there's one character, it fits in the board book or the picture book space. If there are 2 characters, it fits in the picture book space or the early reader and the chapter book space. Because remember, we're dealing with a small amount of room. We have small words. So consider that as you write. If you have a motley cast of characters, then you are looking more at chapter books on up. So your chapter books, your middle grade, and your YA, because it's going to take time for you to support and develop those characters, because you have to develop each one. Each character has to be round, and they have to go through their own journeys. So keep that in mind. If you have 1 or 2, you're set for an illustrated book, heavily illustrated book. But if you have 3 or more, then you are looking at a larger work. Question number 2, which is very important. Can the problem in this book be solved in minutes or a day? Or does it take time to solve this problem? Because the amount of time determines where this book fits too. Your board books, your picture books, and your early readers, they typically happen in a small amount of time. Those are your minute stories that happen in minutes, happen in hours, happen in days. Or a day. Happen in minutes, happen in hours, happens within a day. A single day. Young children don't have a concept of time, so whenever you are dropping words like, on Thursday, he did this. On Tuesday, she did that. 3 weeks ago, he did this. If the problem in your book takes days or weeks to solve and unpack, then you're looking at your chapter book through your middle grade and your YA space. So if it takes a long time to unpack, you're not even considering the smaller books, because young children don't have a concept of time. Young children don't have a concept of time. Remember John Piaget's stages of development. Young children don't have a concept of time. And they also have a shorter attention span. So we have to capture them. So we have to catch them. So we have to contain their stories in a smaller amount of time versus those who are reading middle grade and YA, who understand when you say 3 weeks ago, 2 Tuesdays ago, John sat on the sofa. Young children, although they understand that sentence, 2 weeks ago in their mind is a long, long time ago, just like they think that 30 and 40 years old is old. They don't have a concept of time like we do. The third question, what are the themes you are tackling in this work, and who or what audience are they appropriate for? So you're going to have to write down your themes or think about the themes that you are trying to instill, whether that be friendship, divorce, sexuality, identity, and think about the age range, the age of reader that fits in. And that's going to determine where your story lives. If it's a theme that's too heavy or too challenging for, say, a 4, 5, 6-year-old to unpack, then that doesn't go in the picture book space. That goes in your young adult space. Although there are ways that you can write challenging or difficult topics. Question number 4. Does your story require eloquent language, or would it be fun to use simple sentences and some repetition? And if the answer to that question is yes, then that means that your story, if the themes are age appropriate and it only has 1 or 2 characters, that means that your story is an early reader, and you can write an early reader using your story. If the answer to that is no, then that means that you need to consider all the other questions. Next question, should your text be read aloud? The answer is yes to everything, because you should be reading aloud as you are editing and revising your work. But should it be read aloud to audiences? That's the question. If it is a yes, then that means that it's either a picture book or a board book. Because remember, all the other text are independent readers. Those are the stories that kids read on their own. But if it is a text that's meant to be read aloud, generally a picture book, especially because remember, you don't break into this business writing board books. It's a picture book. And last but not least, does it need pictures? Can it be illustrated? If it can be illustrated and it needs pictures, then it definitely fits either in board books or picture books or a chapter book. But it could also fit in middle grade or YA. So middle grade and young adult novels actually come in pictures, but we'll talk about that in the next video. So go back, understand the genres, ask yourself these 6 questions so you can know where your story belongs. And once you know where your story belongs, the next question is, how does your story want to be told? And that's where the subgenres come in, where we consider if we're going to tell this story by way of reference book or graphic novel, traditional narrative, poetry collection, anthology, however the story is screaming out. So, click on this next video to understand how your story wants to be told. Go to my website to get free resources at kelewis.world. See you in the next video.